It's midnight. You are lying in bed, and your brain is showing you a movie you did not ask to watch. The time you lied to your daughter's face. Something you stole. The promise you broke yes again. The look on someone's face when they finally stopped believing you. You cannot turn it off. You cannot fast forward. And every scene comes with the same narrator, the same voice, your voice, saying, "This is who you really are. Everything else is pretend." Have you been there? That loop at 2 or 3 in the morning where your brain pulls up the worst things you have ever done and presents them as proof of who you are? If you have, this episode is about what is actually happening in your brain when that plays. Because it is not truth. It is not memory working correctly. It is a specific neurological process. It has a name. And once you understand the mechanism, it starts to lose its grip. I'm Elizabeth, and I need to tell you something before we go any further. This is the heaviest episode we have done. Heavier than cravings, heavier than identity. Because today we are talking about the thing underneath everything else. The thing that drives more relapses than cravings do. The thing that most recovery programs reference, but few actually dismantle. Shame. Not guilt, shame. They are different. They live in different parts of your brain. They produce different outcomes. And confusing them is one of the most dangerous things you can do in recovery. By the end of today, you will know the difference. And that difference might change how you talk to yourself for the rest of your life. Thank you for being here for this one. I know it is not easy to sit with. But understanding the thing that is blocking you is the fastest way to move past it. This is Recovery Decoded, Episode 8, The Shame Engine. Your body is healing. Here is the map. You choose the route. So, shame and guilt. Most people use these words interchangeably. They are not the same thing, not even close. And the difference is not philosophical, it is neurological. Brain imaging studies show they activate different circuits entirely. Guilt activates your anterior cingulate cortex and your prefrontal cortex. These are the regions responsible for evaluating behavior and planning corrective action. When you feel guilt, your brain is saying, "I did a bad thing. How do I fix it?" Guilt is uncomfortable, but it is productive. It drives apologies. It drives amends. It drives change. Guilt looks backward at a behavior and forward toward repair. Shame activates your insula and your amygdala, the same threat detection and visceral disgust circuitry we talked about in episode 3. When you feel shame, your brain is not evaluating a behavior, it is evaluating you. Shame says, "I am a bad thing." And the brain responds the same way it responds to any threat. Hide, withdraw, disappear. Shame does not drive repair. It drives isolation. And we have talked about what isolation does in recovery. It is where relapse lives. Let me say that more simply. Guilt is, I got drunk and missed my kid's game. That leads to an apology and a commitment to show up next time. Shame is, I am the kind of person who gets drunk and misses their kid's game. That leads to a bottle. Because if you are the problem, if it is not your behavior, but your identity that is broken, then what is the point of trying? That is why shame is more dangerous than cravings. Cravings are loud. You feel them. You recognize them. You can use the tools from episode 4. Shame is silent. It does not announce itself as shame. It disguises itself as thoughts. I do not deserve this. If they knew who I really was. I have done too much damage. Why bother? And those thoughts drive relapse more reliably than any craving because they attack the foundation. Your belief that recovery is worth having and that you are worth saving. Last week we said, you matter enough to do this for yourself. Shame is the voice that says, no, you do not. So where does shame come from in recovery? There are 4 sources. And most people are carrying more than one. Source 1, the wreckage. Things you did during active use. People you hurt. Lies you told. Money you stole or wasted. Relationships you destroyed. Moments you cannot take back. This is the most obvious source, and the one recovery programs address through amends work and step work. But here's what amends does not always reach. Amends addresses the behavior. It does not always reach the identity wound underneath. You can apologize to your daughter. You can make it right. And the guilt resolves. But the shame, the belief that you are the kind of person who would do that, that can survive the apology. It lives deeper. Source 2, internalized stigma. Society told you that addiction is a moral failure, that you chose this, that strong people do not become addicts, that you could have stopped if you really wanted to. Even if you intellectually understand that addiction is neurological, we covered that in episode 1, the cultural messaging runs deep. You can know it is a brain condition and still feel like it is a character defect. That gap between knowing and feeling is where shame lives. Source 3. And this one is hard to say, but it needs to be said. Recovery culture itself. Some recovery spaces unintentionally reinforce shame. Phrases like, you are only as sick as your secrets. Your best thinking got you here. You are powerless. For some people, these phrases are liberating. They crack open denial and create the humility needed to accept help. For others, they land as confirmation that they are fundamentally broken. The intent is humility. The impact, for some, is shame. And the difference matters. If a phrase in your recovery makes you feel smaller instead of stronger, that phrase is not for you. You are allowed to take what helps and leave what hurts. Source 4. The identity gap from last week. You are no longer the person who used, but you are not yet the person you are becoming. In that gap, shame rushes in to fill the vacuum. Who am I if I am not the drunk? Who am I if I am not the addict? If you do not have an answer yet, shame provides one. You are nobody. You are damaged goods. That is a lie, but it is a convincing one when you are standing in the in-between with nothing to hold on to. Let us talk about where this lives in your body, because shame is not just a thought, it is a physical state. And recognizing the physical signature is the first step to interrupting it. The urge to physically shrink. Hunched shoulders, folded arms, looking down. Your body is trying to make itself smaller, to disappear. That is your nervous system responding to a perceived social threat, the same way it would respond to a physical one. Heat in your face and chest, the flush. That is blood flow redirecting as part of the stress response. Your body is preparing to be seen and judged, even when nobody is watching. Nausea, stomach dropping, that is your insula activating disgust circuitry. But instead of directing the disgust at something external, spoiled food, a bad smell, it is directing it at you. Your brain is running a disgust response on yourself. The impulse to leave, to hide, to isolate, to cancel plans, to not show up. That is not introversion. That is not needing alone time. That is shame pulling you out of connection because connection requires being seen. And being seen feels dangerous when you believe you are not worth seeing. And the 2 a.m. replay loop. Lying in bed. The movie playing on repeat. That is your default mode network. The part of your brain that activates when you are not focused on a task. Running a shame cycle. It is pulling up memories tagged with the highest emotional charge and presenting them as evidence of who you are. But here is what it is not doing. It is not showing you the full picture. It is showing you a prosecution with no defense. It is a rigged courtroom. And you are serving as judge, jury, and prisoner. If you need to pause this and come back later, it will be here. This is heavy. Take what you can today. Real talk. If you are lying awake at night, replaying the worst things you have ever done, I want you to understand what is happening. Your brain is not showing you truth. It is running a program that selects the most emotionally charged memories, strips them of context, and presents them as the complete picture of who you are. That is not memory. That is prosecution. You would never judge another human being based only on their worst moments. You would never look at someone in early recovery and say, "You are nothing but the worst things you have done." You would say, "You are more than that. You are trying. You are here. That counts." Say that to yourself. I know how that sounds. I know it feels hollow right now. Say it anyway. Because shame thrives in the silence between the thought and the challenge. Every time you challenge it, even weakly, you weaken the circuit. That is not motivational talk. That is how neural pathways work. If someone in your recovery told you that you are only as sick as your secrets, and that phrase made you feel smaller instead of free, it was not for you. It works for some people. It does not work for everyone. You are allowed to take what helps and leave what hurts. That is not weakness. That is discernment. If you have been sober for weeks or months and you still feel like a fraud, like you are performing recovery while the real you is something ugly underneath, that is not intuition. That is shame wearing the mask of truth. Shame is the most convincing liar in your brain. It speaks in your own voice, it uses your own memories, and it tells you that the worst version of yourself is the real one. It is wrong. Let that sit for a moment. You have been carrying this longer than anyone should have to. And the fact that you are still here, still listening, still trying to understand instead of giving up, that is not what a broken person does. That is what a strong person does on the hardest day of their life. Here's your toolkit. 5 tools built specifically for shame. Not cravings, not stress, shame. Tool 1, the courtroom reframe. When the 2 a.m. replay starts, consciously appoint a defense attorney. Your brain is running a prosecution. You are allowed to mount a defense. For every memory shame presents as evidence, ask 3 questions. Is there context I am leaving out? Was I in active addiction when this happened? Meaning my prefrontal cortex was impaired and my decision-making was neurologically compromised. And would I judge someone else this harshly for the same thing? You are not dismissing what happened. You are not excusing it. You are giving yourself the same fairness you would give any other human being on this planet without hesitation. If you would offer someone else context and compassion, you deserve it too. When to use it. At 2 a.m. when the loop starts. When a memory hits you out of nowhere during the day. When you are about to isolate because the weight feels unbearable. Tool 2. Shame naming. Shame loses power when it is spoken out loud. Not to everyone. To one safe person. The format is simple. I feel shame about, and then say the specific thing, not the category, the thing. Not, I feel shame about my past. That is too vague for your brain to process. I feel shame about the time I stole money from my mother's purse while she was in the hospital. Specific. Research from Brené Brown and others consistently shows that shame cannot survive being spoken. It thrives in secrecy and silence. The act of naming it to a therapist, a sponsor, a trusted friend, breaks the circuit. You do not need them to fix it. You do not need them to forgive you. You just need a witness. Someone who hears the worst thing and does not leave. This connects to the Call Someone script from episode 4. I am having a hard moment. I do not need you to fix it. I just need to not be alone with it. That script works for shame too. When to use it. When a specific shame memory is cycling and will not stop. When isolation is pulling you away from people. When you cannot sleep because of what you are carrying. Tool 3. Guilt extraction. Take the shame thought and convert it to a guilt thought. This is a specific cognitive exercise. I am a terrible parent becomes I missed my daughter's game and I feel awful about it. The first attacks your identity. The second describes a behavior, and behaviors can be addressed. Ask, is there an action I can take? An amends I can make? A behavior I can change going forward? If yes, that is guilt doing its job, pointing you toward repair. Do the repair. If the thought resists conversion, if it keeps returning to I am bad instead of I did something bad, that is shame, not guilt. And shame needs processing, not action. That is where therapy, specifically EMDR or trauma-focused work from episode 6, comes in. Shame that resists guilt extraction is often rooted in something older than the addiction. A therapist can help you reach it. When to use it. When you cannot tell if what you are feeling is productive guilt or destructive shame. When you are spiraling and need to figure out whether there is an action to take or a wound to process. Tool 4. The evidence log. Same concept as the mirror check from episode 7, but specifically aimed at shame. When shame says you are a bad person, pull out evidence. What did you do this week that a bad person would not have done? Did you show up somewhere? Did you call someone when you were struggling? Did you not use when every part of you wanted to? Did you listen to 8 episodes of a podcast about understanding yourself? Write it down. Shame argues with feelings. Evidence argues with facts. Feelings are loud. Facts are stubborn. Over time, the evidence accumulates and shame's argument gets weaker. Not because you argued back, because you built a counter record that your prefrontal cortex can reference when the amygdala starts the prosecution. When to use it? Daily, or at minimum weekly alongside the why audit from episode 7. Make it a habit. The evidence only works if it exists. Tool 5. The "would I say this to them?" test. When shame is at its loudest, imagine someone you love. Your daughter, your best friend, someone you met in a meeting who is struggling, coming to you and saying the exact thing you are telling yourself, word for word. I am worthless. I have done too much damage. I do not deserve to get better. What would you say to them? Would you agree? Would you say, yes, you are right, you are worthless? Or would you say, that is not true? You are more than the worst thing you have done. You deserve to heal. Say that to yourself. Write it down if you cannot say it out loud. Read it. You deserve the same compassion you would give without hesitation to someone else. And if you cannot believe that yet, practice it anyway. Compassion, like any neural pathway, strengthens with repetition. You do not have to believe it perfectly. You just have to practice it consistently. When to use it. When shame is so loud you cannot hear anything else. When you are about to give up. When the voice in your head is crueler than anything anyone else has ever said to you. Here is what to expect with shame as your brain heals. Days 1 through 14. Shame is at its loudest. The wreckage is fresh. You remember everything in high definition, and you have not yet built enough sober evidence to counter the narrative. This is the hardest stretch. If the only tool you can manage right now is the evidence log, writing down one thing per day that a bad person would not do, that is enough. Days 14 through 30. Shame starts competing with small moments of competence. You did something right. You showed up somewhere. You kept a promise. The shame is still loud, but now there is a counter signal. Notice it. Days 30 through 60. If you are doing amends work or therapy, the specific guilt-based items start resolving. You apologize. You make it right where you can. The guilt lifts. What remains is the identity level shame. And that is what needs processing, not just action. This is when therapy becomes most powerful for shame specifically. Days 60 through 90. The evidence accumulates. The mirror check from episode 7 and the evidence log from today start producing real data. The new identity from episode 7 has enough weight to challenge shame's narrative. Not defeat it entirely. Challenge it. Shame becomes a voice in the room instead of the only voice. 90 days and beyond. Shame does not disappear. Honestly, I am not sure it ever fully disappears. The research is not definitive on that. But it gets quieter. It becomes something you notice and name instead of something that controls you. And the gap between the shame thought and your response to it grows wider. That gap is freedom, not the absence of shame, the ability to hear it and choose differently. Here is what I want you to do this week. one thing. The next time the 2 a.m. loop starts, or the next time a shame thought hits you during the day, try the courtroom reframe. Appoint the defense attorney. Ask the 3 questions. Is there context I am leaving out? Was I neurologically impaired? Would I judge someone else this harshly? You do not have to win the case. You just have to show up for your own defense. That is more than shame has ever asked you to do. If there is something we have not covered that you need to hear about, a specific shame you are carrying, a question about amends, how to handle a relationship with someone you hurt, something you have never said out loud, put it in the comments. This show is built around what you are actually going through, not what we think you should hear. You decide what comes next. And whatever you are facing this week, remember, nobody is making this choice for you. Not a therapist, not a program, not the voice at 2 a.m. You are choosing to understand. You are choosing to show up for your own defense. That is yours. Nobody gave it to you, and nobody can take it back. The more you understand, the more you own your recovery.